The first light of dawn crept across the windswept plains like a cautious animal, painting the dust-colored buildings of Elk Creek in shades of amber and rust. Clara Edison knelt beside a small cot in the infirmary, her steady hands working a needle through torn flesh with the practiced ease of someone who had sewn more wounds than wedding dresses. The child, beneath her care, no more than 6, bit down on a leather strap as she worked, his eyes squeezed shut against the pain. "There now, brave as General Washington himself," Clara murmured, tying off the final stitch. She smoothed the boy's sweat-damp hair back from his forehead. "Your mother will be proud. No more climbing those canyon rocks. You hear?" The boy nodded solemnly, and Clara helped him sit up, wrapping the bandage around his forearm with gentle efficiency. Through the single window of the makeshift infirmary, little more than a converted storage building with whitewashed walls and a tin roof, she could see the settlement stirring to life. Traders checked their wagon wheels. The blacksmith's hammer began its daily rhythm, and somewhere a rooster crowed its territorial claim over the morning. Clara had been in Elk Creek for 3 years now, long enough for the suspicious glances to fade into grudging acceptance. She'd arrived on a mail coach with little more than her medical bag and a letter of recommendation from a doctor in St. Louis who'd trained her in the basics of frontier medicine. The townspeople called her Nurse Edison, with a mixture of respect and distance, as if her unmarried state and mysterious past made her both necessary and dangerous. She sent the boy on his way with a pat on his good shoulder and turned to organize her supplies. The shelves held precious little laudanum running low again, bandages she'd torn from old petticoats, herbs gathered from the surrounding hills. She hummed softly as she worked, an old hymn her mother had sung before the fever took her. The melody helped to keep other memories at bay, memories that belonged to darkness and shame. "Miss Edison." A gravelly voice interrupted her reverie. Marshal Benjamin Franklin stood in the doorway, his badge catching the morning light. He was a decent man, one of the few who'd shown her kindness when she'd first arrived. His weathered face bore lines of concern. "Marshal Franklin, someone injured?" "Not yet." He removed his hat, running fingers through thinning hair. "But there's been Apache sightings. Scouts from Fort Grant say it's Blackhawk's band, though others claim it might be raiders from further south. Either way, folks are getting nervous." Clara's hands stilled on the bottle she was cleaning. "Blackhawk's people haven't caused trouble in months. Last I heard, they were trading peacefully near Tucson. Times change. Caleb Hargrove's been stirring up the men, talking about taking action before they strike first." Franklin's expression darkened at the mention of Hargrove. The man ran the largest ranch outside town and commanded a group of riders who were quicker with their guns than their thinking. Preemptive violence rarely ends well. Clara said carefully, "That's what I told him, but when men get scared..." Franklin shrugged. "Lock your door tonight, Miss Edison, just to be safe." After he left, Clara tried to return to her work, but unease had taken root in her chest. She'd learned to trust her instincts. They'd saved her before, though not soon enough. Her hand unconsciously moved to her left side, where beneath her cotton dress and corset, old scars told their own story. The day passed in a blur of minor ailments, a cowhand's infected splinter, a child's persistent cough, an elderly woman's joint pain. But underneath the routine, tension crackled through the settlement like lightning before a storm. Men clustered in small groups, voices low and urgent. Women hurried their children indoors earlier than usual, as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and red. Clara prepared to close the infirmary. She was reaching for the lamp when she heard it, the thunder of hooves, too many and too fast for ordinary travel. Her blood turned to ice water in her veins. The door burst open. Not Marshal Franklin this time, but Caleb Hargrove himself, rifle in hand, eyes wild with righteous fury. Behind him, she could hear shouts, screams, the crash of overturning wagons. "Everyone to the main ranch house," he barked. "Apache raid move." But Clara hesitated, glancing at her medical supplies. People would be hurt. They would need, "I said move, woman." Hargrove grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. That touch, that commanding grip, sent her back 3 years in an instant. Another hand, another man who'd claimed the right to her body. The lamp slipped from her fingers, oil spreading across the wooden floor. "Let go," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Stupid girl, there's no time." The world exploded into chaos. Fire arrows struck the buildings, including the spreading lamp oil at Clara's feet. Smoke billowed, thick and choking. Through the haze, she saw shapes riders moving with deadly purpose through the settlement. Not the wild, disorganized attack she'd imagined, but something tactical, focused. Hargrove dragged her outside, but in the confusion, his grip loosened. Clara stumbled, caught between fleeing and returning for medical supplies. That moment of indecision cost her. A horse thundered past, its rider leaning down. Strong arms encircled her waist, lifting her as easily as a child. She screamed, fought, her fists beating against leather and muscle. But the warrior for warrior he clearly was simply shifted her weight and continued riding. The settlement fell away behind them, orange flames licking at the darkening sky. Clara's last coherent sight was of the infirmary burning, all her carefully hoarded supplies turning to ash. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. Clara had stopped fighting, exhaustion and shock rendering her limp in her captor's grip. When they finally slowed, she found herself among a group of perhaps 20 riders. Apache, her mind supplied numbly, but something was wrong with the picture. These weren't the savage raiders of frontier legend. They moved with military precision, spoke in low, controlled voices. Her captor dismounted, lifting her down with surprising gentleness. In the moonlight, she got her first clear look at him. Angular features carved from shadow and starlight, eyes dark as the space between stars. Younger than she'd expected, perhaps only a few years older than her own 24 years. He wore traditional dress, but carried himself with an authority that transcended culture. "Little healer," he said in accented English, and she startled. How did he know? Then she realized her medical bag, still somehow clutched in her white-knuckled grip. "You are outside the main buildings. That makes you one of them." "One of who?" Clara's voice came out cracked, dry from smoke and fear. He studied her for a long moment. Around them, his men were organizing, checking weapons, tending to minor wounds, professional soldiers, not random raiders. "The ones who shelter those who killed our children," he said finally. "The ones who protect murderers." "I don't understand. I'm the town nurse. I help everyone. I don't—" "Edison," one of the other warriors called out, and Clara's blood froze. He was holding something a patient ledger she'd foolishly kept near the door. Her name was written clearly on the cover. She treated Hargrove's men. "Here, see Thomas Hargrove. Gunshot wound. 2 weeks ago." Thomas, Caleb's younger brother. She remembered him brought in barely conscious, babbling about an ambush, about teaching savages a lesson. She'd saved his life because that's what she did. She hadn't asked what he'd done to earn that bullet. The leader, for clearly that's what he was, took the ledger, scanning it with eyes that clearly understood more written English than she'd expected. His expression hardened. "You saved the life of a child killer." "I save everyone," Clara said desperately. "That's what I do. I don't judge. I just heal. Please. There's been a mistake." "Yes," he agreed, but not in the way she'd hoped. "There has been a mistake. You should not have been outside. Now you are here, and I must decide what to do with you." One of the younger warriors said something sharp in Apache, gesturing at her with obvious intent. The leader's response was equally sharp, shutting down whatever had been suggested. He turned back to Clara. "You will ride with us. You will not be harmed if you do not fight. But you are now property of war, and you will answer for the crimes of those you aided." "I aided injured people," Clara said, finding a spark of courage in her indignation. "I've aided your people too, when they've come to town. Ask in Tucson. They know me there." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or consideration, then it was gone. "Tie her hands," he ordered in English, clearly wanting her to understand. "But not too tight. She is a healer. We may have need of those hands," as rough rope encircled her wrists. Clara fought down panic. This wasn't supposed to happen. She'd run so far, changed her name, built a new life. She'd been careful, good, useful. She'd atoned in service for the shame she carried. But as they lifted her onto a horse, binding her to the saddle, she realized that the past had a way of finding you no matter how far you ran. It just wore different faces. The warrior who'd captured her mounted his own horse, taking her reins. Up close, she could smell sage and smoke, leather, and something indefinably wild. He glanced back at her once. "I am Lincoln," he said, and she almost laughed at the incongruity of it, an Apache warrior named for the great emancipator. "You will not be harmed tonight, but tomorrow you will answer questions. The truth may save you. Lies will not." They rode into the deepening night, leaving the burning settlement behind. Clara's medical bag bumped against her bound hands with each step of the horse, a reminder of who she'd been just hours ago. Above them, the stars watched with cold indifference, and she remembered her mother's hymn. But the words wouldn't come now, lost like everything else in the smoke and chaos of her taken life. As they climbed higher into the hills, Clara allowed herself one look back. Elk Creek glowed like a fallen star in the distance, and she wondered if Marshall Franklin had survived, if the boy she'd stitched that morning had made it to safety. Then Lincoln chirped to the horses, and they picked up speed, carrying her away from one life and into another. She didn't cry. She'd learned long ago that tears changed nothing. Instead, she counted the stars, named the constellations, recited the bones of the human hand in Latin, anything to keep her mind from spiraling into memories of another time she'd been helpless, bound by circumstances beyond her control. But even as fear coursed through her veins like poison, a small part of her noticed things. How Lincoln kept the pace steady but not punishing. How he checked the rope at her wrists when they paused to water the horses, loosening it slightly without being asked. How he positioned his horse between her and the younger warriors who looked at her with anger she didn't yet understand. These observations she filed away like medical notes, unsure if they were symptoms of hope or merely the fevered dreams of a woman grasping at any straw in a storm. Either way, as the night deepened and the miles stretched between her and everything she'd known, Clara Edison, who had already survived one destruction of self, prepared to survive another. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and uncaring, as the war party carried her into the unknown darkness of the frontier night. The sun rose like a brass coin in the endless sky, and with it came the heat that pressed down on Clara's shoulders like a physical weight. They had ridden through the night, stopping only to water the horses and allow their captives, for she'd realized she wasn't the only one taking a moment's respite. Now, as the morning stretched into afternoon, the landscape had transformed from the familiar plains around Elk Creek to something harsher, more unforgiving. Red rock mesas rose like ancient sentinels, their layered faces telling stories older than any human memory. Scraggly juniper and pinyon pine clung to life in the sandy soil, and everywhere the land seemed to shimmer with heat that made her vision blur. Clara's throat was parched, her lips cracked despite the water Lincoln had shared with surprising regularity. She rode in a daze, her bound hands gripping the saddle horn, her body swaying with each step of the horse. The dress she'd worn to tend patients, practical brown cotton with small pearl buttons, was now torn at the hem, stained with smoke and sweat. Her carefully pinned hair had come loose, auburn strands sticking to her neck and face. Behind her, she could hear the other captives, 2 Mexican traders who'd been camped outside town, and a young man she recognized as one of Hargrove's ranch hands. The traders maintained a stoic silence, but the ranch hand, barely 18, with the unfortunate name of Napoleon Jones, kept up a steady stream of complaints and threats. "You savages will hang for this," he spat for the 10th time. "Caleb Hargrove will hunt every last one of you down, string you up like the animals you are." One of the younger Apache warriors, who Lincoln had called Roosevelt, finally lost patience. He wheeled his horse around, hand moving to the knife at his belt. "Roosevelt." Lincoln's voice carried quiet authority. A single word, but it stopped the young warrior cold. Clara watched this interaction with the part of her mind that remained clinical, detached. Leadership dynamics, she noted. Respect based on something more than fear. It didn't align with the stories she'd heard about Apache raiders wild, uncontrolled, driven by bloodlust. They climbed higher into the mountains as the day wore on. The horses picked their way carefully along paths that seemed invisible to Clara's eyes but were apparently as clear as roads to their captors. She found herself counting steps, breaths, anything to keep her mind occupied and away from the growing discomfort in her body. It wasn't just the physical pain, though that was considerable. The rope chafed her wrists. Her legs ached from the unfamiliar position, and her corset designed for standing in an infirmary, not riding, dug into her ribs with each movement. But worse was the familiar sensation of helplessness, of being at the mercy of men who held power over her. Not again, a voice whispered in her mind. Please, not again. 3 years ago in Chicago, Dr. Wellington's hands, the shame that had driven her west, made her change her name from Clara Nightingale to Clara Edison, the scar that even now throbbed with phantom pain. Little healer, Lincoln's voice startled her from the spiral of memory. He had pulled his horse alongside hers, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. You are not well. It wasn't a question. Clara straightened as much as her bound hands would allow, lifting her chin. I'm fine. You lie poorly. He reached into his saddlebag, producing a canteen. Drink. She wanted to refuse, to maintain some small rebellion, but her body betrayed her. She drank greedily when he held the canteen to her lips, the water warm but precious. Why do you call me that? She asked when she'd finished. Little healer, you are small, he said matter-of-factly. And you heal. The name fits. Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. There was something refreshingly direct about his logic. My name is Clara. I know, it was in your book. He gestured to the medical ledger now secured in his pack. Clara Edison, like the man who makes light without fire. Thomas Edison, yes, no relation. The lie came easily. She'd told it so many times it felt like truth. They rode in silence for a time. Then Lincoln spoke again, his voice careful. The men you healed, Hargrove's men, what did they tell you of their wounds? Clara hesitated. Patient confidentiality warred with self-preservation. I don't ask how people get hurt, I just treat them noble. The word carried no mockery, but no approval either. Tell me, Clara Edison, if a wolf comes to you bleeding, do you heal it knowing it will hunt again? People aren't wolves. No, he agreed. Wolves kill only to eat. Before she could respond, a shout went up from the front of the group. They had reached their destination, a temporary camp by the look of it, hidden in a box canyon with steep walls and a narrow entrance. Canvas and hide shelters clustered near a spring that trickled from the rock face, and Clara saw women and children moving among them. Her arrival caused a stir. Apache women emerged to stare at the captives, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, wide-eyed and solemn. Lincoln dismounted and lifted Clara down, his hands careful but impersonal. Her legs nearly buckled after so many hours in the saddle, and she had to grip his arm to stay upright. The contact lasted only seconds, but she felt the strength in those muscles, the easy power that could hurt or help with equal ease. He cut her bonds with a single slice of his knife, and Clara rubbed her wrists, trying to restore circulation. Around her, the other captives were being similarly freed, though under heavy guard. You will stay here, Lincoln told her, indicating a small shelter set slightly apart from the others. Food and water will be brought. Do not try to leave. The desert is not kind to those who don't know its ways. As if to emphasize his point, a woman approached with a water gourd and a portion of what looked like dried meat and flatbread. She appeared to be about Clara's age, with intelligent eyes that assessed the white woman with sharp interest. This is Victoria, Lincoln said. She speaks your language. She will see to your needs. Victoria said something rapid in Apache, and Lincoln's mouth tightened. They exchanged several more sentences, the woman's tone growing heated. Finally, Lincoln held up a hand, ending the discussion. "Rest," he told Clara. "Tomorrow, questions. Tonight, you are safe." He strode away, leaving Clara with Victoria, who continued to study her with disconcerting intensity. "You're the one who saved Thomas Hargrove," Victoria said in clear, barely accented English. Clara's stomach dropped. "I save everyone who comes to me injured." He boasted of it in Tucson, how the white nurse brought him back from death's door after he'd taught the Apache dogs a lesson. Victoria's voice was cold as winter wind. "My sister's children were at that camp, 3 and 5 years old, too young to run fast enough." The dried meat turned to ash in Clara's mouth. She set it down carefully. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Ignorance and innocence are not the same thing." Victoria turned to go, then paused. "Lincoln argues for your life. He says healers are sacred, even enemy healers. Others disagree. I tell you this so you understand your medical bag may not be enough to save you." Left alone, Clara tried to eat, knowing she needed strength for whatever came next. But the food sat heavy in her stomach, weighted with the knowledge of what Thomas Hargrove had done. She'd saved a child killer, the oath she'd taken first. Do no harm suddenly seemed naive, a luxury of civilization that had no place in this harsh land where actions had consequences written in blood. As darkness fell, the camp settled into evening routines. The smell of cooking fires drifted on the air, mixed with the sound of voices, children's laughter, a woman singing softly. It was achingly domestic, so at odds with her preconceptions that Clara felt disoriented. The temperature dropped precipitously once the sun set, and Clara shivered in her torn dress. She just wrapped her arms around herself when Lincoln appeared, carrying a blanket. "You are cold." Again, that matter-of-fact observation. He held out the blanket, and she took it gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Thank you." He crouched near the entrance to her shelter, not entering but close enough to speak quietly. "Victoria told you about her sister's children. It wasn't a question." Clara nodded. "What do you think now, knowing what the man you saved did?" Clara was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. I think healing is still sacred, but perhaps I should have asked more questions." "Perhaps." He studied her in the firelight. "You have been hurt, old hurt. You hide it, but it shows in how you hold yourself, how you fear touch but pretend not to." Clara's hand moved involuntarily to her left side. "That's not how could you?" "I have seen many who have been broken by others. They move differently, breathe differently." His voice held no judgment, only observation. "Who hurt you?" "Clara Edison." "That's not your concern. Everything about you is my concern now." Still no threat in the words, just fact. "But tonight, rest. Tomorrow is soon enough for truth." He rose to leave, but Clara found herself speaking. "The children, Victoria's sister's children. What were their names?" Lincoln paused. "Mary and James. English names their mother gave them, hoping it would help them live in both worlds." After he left, Clara lay on the blanket he'd provided, staring up at the strip of stars visible between the canyon walls. Mary and James, 3 and 5, too young to run fast enough. She thought of Thomas Hargrove, swaggering into her infirmary with his bullet wound, boasting about teaching lessons. She'd assumed he meant he'd been in a proper fight, man to man. She'd been a fool, worse than a fool complicit. Her hand found the spot on her left side where beneath fabric and whalebone. The scar tissue pulled tight. Doctor. Wellington had been charming too, right up until he wasn't. Until she'd refused his advances and he'd shown her what powerful men did to women who forgot their place. The poker from his fireplace had been hot enough to cauterize even as it burned, keeping her from bleeding out but leaving a mark that would never fade. She'd fled Chicago in shame, changed her name, tried to build a new life dedicated to healing, penance. She'd thought, service to others to atone for her own stain. But what good was healing if it enabled more harm sleep? When it finally came. was fitful. She dreamed of children running through smoke, of her mother's hymns mixed with Apache war cries, of Dr. Wellington's face morphing into Thomas Hargrove's, morphing into Lincoln's. She woke several times, heart racing. The blanket twisted around her like a shroud. The last time she woke, it was to find someone watching her. A small figure crouched just outside her shelter, a child, perhaps 7 or 8, with curious eyes that caught the moonlight. "Hello," Clara whispered. The child tilted their head, then spoke in careful English. "You are the healer who saves bad men." I try to save everyone. My grandmother says healers must choose. Save the wolf or save the sheep, but not both." Before Clara could respond, the child melted back into the darkness, leaving her alone with that wisdom that cut deeper than any knife. When dawn finally came, painting the canyon walls in shades of rose and gold, Clara emerged from her shelter to find Lincoln waiting. He carried her medical bag. "Come," he said. "There are injured who need tending. You will show us what kind of healer you truly are." As she followed him through the camp, past the watching eyes of those who had every reason to hate her, Clara felt the weight of the child's words. Save the wolf or save the sheep. For the first time in 3 years, since she'd fled Chicago and reinvented herself, she wondered if her simple doctrine of healing all who came to her was not noble but naive. The test was coming, and this time, she couldn't hide behind ignorance or good intentions. This time, she would have to choose. The morning air carried the scent of pinon smoke and something Clara couldn't identify, a herb, perhaps sharp and medicinal. She followed Lincoln through the camp, her medical bag clutched in hands that trembled slightly from more than just the dawn chill. Eyes tracked their movement, women pausing in their work, children peering around their mothers, warriors whose expressions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. The injured were gathered in a larger shelter near the center of camp. As Clara ducked inside, her healer's instincts immediately took over, cataloging what she saw. 3 men with various wounds, one with a clearly infected gash on his forearm, another favoring his left side in a way that suggested broken ribs, and a third whose labored breathing spoke of something more serious. "These men were hurt in a skirmish 2 days ago," Lincoln said. "Our healer was killed in the raid that took you. They have waited." Victoria was already there, tending the man with breathing troubles. She looked up as Clara entered, her expression unreadable. "What has been done for them so far?" Clara asked, setting down her bag and rolling up her sleeves. "Poultices of creosote and willow bark, spirit ceremonies." Victoria's tone was carefully neutral. "But the wounds grow angry." Clara knelt beside the man with the infected arm first. The wound was deep, angry red streaking up toward his elbow. Without antibiotics still decades away, infection was often a death sentence on the frontier. "I need hot water," she said, falling into the familiar rhythm of care. "As hot as can be managed, and clean cloth boiled if possible, and—" She hesitated, then reached into her bag for the small bottle of carbolic acid she'd been hoarding. "This will hurt, but it may save your arm." The warrior introduced as Grant, which seemed incongruous, until Clara remembered how many Apache had taken English names, watched her with stoic eyes as she worked. She cleaned the wound thoroughly, the carbolic acid drawing a sharp hiss of pain he couldn't quite suppress. "You use the burning water," Victoria observed. "We have seen this in the army doctors. Joseph Lister's techniques." Clara explained as she worked. "Cleanliness prevents the bad spirits, the infection from spreading." She glanced up. "Your poultices are good. The willow bark especially, it reduces fever and pain. Perhaps we could combine methods?" Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. It was clearly not what she'd expected to hear from a white healer. As Clara worked, she became aware of others gathering. Women and children filtered in, watching her tend their men with expressions of guarded hope. She moved from Grant to the man with broken ribs, Washington. They called him binding them carefully after determining none had punctured a lung. The third man was more serious. Each breath was a struggle, and Clara could hear the telltale crackling that suggested fluid in the lungs. How long has he been like this? She asked Victoria. Since the fighting. He breathed in much smoke when they burned our winter supplies. Smoke inhalation. Clara had seen it before, after fires in Chicago. There was little she could do except try to ease his breathing and hope his lungs could clear themselves. Prop him up, she instructed. The fluid settles when he lies flat, and steam he needs to breathe steam. Boil water with sage or mint if you have it. As the women hurried to follow her instructions, Clara became aware of a small hand tugging at her skirt. She looked down to find a girl of perhaps 5 years, one arm cradled against her chest. And what happened here? Clara asked gently. Crouching to the child's level, the girl said something in Apache, and Victoria translated, "She fell from a horse yesterday. Her mother thinks the arm is broken." "May I look?" The child nodded solemnly, and Clara examined the arm with careful fingers. Not broken, thankfully, but badly sprained. As she fashioned a sling from torn cloth, she found herself humming the same hymn she'd been humming in her infirmary what felt like a lifetime ago. The child's eyes widened. She said something rapid to her mother, who had appeared at the shelter entrance. "She says you sing like her grandmother did." Victoria translated, something odd in her voice. "The Jesus song. Your grandmother was Christian. The missionaries came when I was young. Some listened, some took their words and made them our own." Victoria's mouth twisted. "It did not save us from Christian bullets." Clara finished with the sling, showing the mother how to adjust it. More people had gathered now, minor injuries and ailments that had been waiting for attention. An elderly woman with joint pain that Clara recognized as arthritis. A young man with a festering spider bite. A baby with croup whose barking cough made Clara's heart clench. She lost herself in the work, in the familiar rhythm of diagnosis and treatment. This was what she knew, what she was good at. Here, the labels of Apache and white fell away, leaving only healer and patient. Hours passed. Lincoln had left at some point, but Clara hardly noticed. She was explaining to a young mother how to prepare willow bark tea for her teething infant when she realized Victoria was laughing, actually laughing. "What? You sound like my grandmother," Victoria said, very serious about the right way to make medicine. "She would have liked you, I think, before she knew what your people would become to us." It was the first softening Clara had seen in the woman's demeanor. She ventured carefully. "Will you tell me about her?" As they worked side by side, Victoria began to speak. Her grandmother had been a healer, trained in the old ways but curious about new knowledge. She'd learned from Mexican curanderas, from traveled traders, even from a Spanish priest who'd known herb lore. She said healing was like water, it finds its own level, flows where it's needed, doesn't care about the container. Victoria's hands were steady as she ground herbs with a stone pestle. But then the soldiers came, and healing wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Clara thought of her own grandmother, teaching her to identify healing plants in their Chicago garden before the city swallowed all the green spaces. Different plants. Same purpose, same hope that knowledge could stand against harm. The day wore on. Clara's dress, already worse for wear, became stained with plant dyes and medicine. Her careful coiffure had long since given way to practicality, her hair bound back with a strip of cloth Victoria had provided. She looked, she realized, nothing like the proper nurse who'd started her morning in Elk Creek. As the sun reached its zenith, Lincoln returned. He surveyed the shelter, now organized and filled with the quiet activity of healing rather than the tense waiting of the morning. "You have been busy, little healer." There was need. Clara was preparing a tincture, showing a young woman how to measure the drops. "Your people have good medicine knowledge. We've been combining methods, and they accept this, the mixing." It was Victoria who answered. "Healing is healing. As my grandmother said, water finds its level." Lincoln's expression shifted, something Clara couldn't read passing over his features. "The council meets tonight to decide about the captives." Clara's hands stilled on the bottle. For a few hours, she'd almost forgotten she was a prisoner. "She has helped our people," Victoria said, surprising Clara. That should speak for her. Perhaps, But Thomas Hargrove's victims also need their voice heard. Lincoln's tone was neutral, giving nothing away. Continue your work, but know that healing today does not erase yesterday's choices. After he left, Clara tried to focus on her remaining patients, but the spell was broken. She was not a colleague here. She was a captive who happened to have useful skills. The warmth she'd felt, the connection over shared knowledge, might not be enough to save her life. As afternoon shadows grew long, Victoria began preparing to leave. She paused at the entrance, looking back at Clara. My grandmother had a saying, "The plant that heals can also poison. The hand that helps can also harm. Wisdom is knowing which you hold." She tilted her head. "Which do you hold?" "Clara Edison." "I don't know anymore." Clara admitted quietly, "I thought I was holding healing, but perhaps I was just closing my eyes to the poison." Victoria nodded slowly. "That is the beginning of wisdom, whether it comes in time." She shrugged. "We will see." As evening approached, Clara was allowed to return to her shelter. She'd been given food venison stew and flatbread that was far better than the previous night's meager fare, a sign of acceptance or a last meal she couldn't tell. She sat outside the shelter, watching the camp settle into evening routines. The domestic scenes were achingly familiar, yet foreign mothers calling children to eat, men tending to horses, elders sitting in conversation. If she squinted, it could almost be any small community anywhere. The child from the night before appeared again, this time bolder. She plopped down next to Clara without invitation, cradling her injured arm carefully. "You fixed me," she announced in her careful English. "Your arm will heal quickly. Children always do." "My name is Florence," the child said proudly. "Like the white lady who makes medicine. My teacher at the mission school told us stories." Florence Nightingale. Clara's throat tightened at the irony. That was the name she'd left behind in Chicago, the name too heavy with shame to carry. "That's a beautiful name," she managed. "What's your name, your real name?" Children had a way of seeing through subterfuge. Clara hesitated. "Clara, just Clara. That's not your whole name." Florence scrunched her face. "Everyone has two names, even Lincoln. He's Lincoln Roosevelt in your language, so you must be Clara something." "Clara Edison," she said, the lie automatic. Florence shook her head. "That's not your real name. You say it wrong. Like when I have to say my school name instead of my real name." Before Clara could respond, a woman called out in Apache. Florence jumped up, but turned back. "Thank you for fixing my arm. Clara, real name hidden. I hope they don't decide to kill you tomorrow." The casual delivery of that statement left Clara breathless, but Florence was already running off, her sling-bound arm not slowing her down at all. As full dark settled over the canyon, Clara could see fires being lit near the center of camp. Voices rose and fell in what sounded like formal discussion. The council, deciding her fate. She thought about running. The canyon entrance was guarded, but perhaps in the dark. Then she thought about the miles of empty desert, her lack of water or supplies, her ignorance of the terrain. Lincoln had been right, the desert was not kind to those who didn't know its ways. Instead, she sat and watched the stars emerge, the same stars that had watched her flee Chicago, the same stars that had shone over Elk Creek as it burned, indifferent celestial witnesses to all human folly and hope. "You're not praying." Lincoln's voice made her jump. He moved as quietly as a shadow, appearing beside her shelter without warning. "I was in my way." "The Jesus prayers like the one you sang?" "No, just talking to the stars. They're good listeners. Never judge." She glanced at him. "Is the council finished?" "No, they debate still. I came to ask a question." He settled into a crouch, balanced easily on his heels. "If you were freed tomorrow, what would you do?" It wasn't what she'd expected. I don't know. Go back to Elk Creek. I suppose, if there's anything left, people will need healing after the raid. The men who burned our winter stores, who killed our horses, who shot at our children. You would heal them." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, no, I don't know." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "I've been thinking about that all day, about wolves and sheep and which to save. I don't have an answer." "Then I will tell you something. The raid on your town, it was not random. Hargrove's brother led attacks on 3 of our camps, peaceful camps, with signed treaty papers. He burned them out, drove families into the desert without water. Some died, children and elders who couldn't travel fast enough. Mary and James, yes, and others." His voice carried old grief. "So we struck back, eye for an eye. Your Bible says, 'But we took you by accident. You were not meant to be there. The men thought the infirmary empty.'" Clara absorbed this. A mistake. She'd been captured by mistake, just as she'd healed a killer by ignorance. "What will happen to me? That depends on many things, on what the council decides, on what the army does, on whether Hargrove seeks vengeance or accepts the justice of equal loss." He studied her. "On who you choose to be. Clara, real name hidden." She startled. "How did you—" Little Florence has a carrying voice. Was that amusement in his tone? "So, who are you really?" And sitting there under the infinite stars, beside this man who held her life in his hands, yet had shown her more genuine respect in 2 days than she'd known in years. Clara found herself speaking truth. "Clara Nightingale. I was Clara Nightingale in Chicago. I changed it when I fled." "Why did you flee?" The words came slowly, painfully. "I was training under a doctor." "Dr. Wellington. He was brilliant, respected. He wanted more than I could give. When I refused, he decided to teach me my place." The scar Victoria noticed a fireplace poker, hot enough to brand. Lincoln was silent, but she felt his attention like a physical thing. "I ran, changed my name, came west where no one knew me. Thought if I healed enough people, saved enough lives, it would balance the scales, make me clean again." She laughed bitterly. "Instead, I saved men who murder children. So much for atonement. Pain is not dirt to be washed away," Lincoln said quietly. "It is a scar that becomes part of your skin. You cannot be who you were before, but you can choose who you become after." They sat in companionable silence for a time. Then Lincoln rose. "The council continues. By dawn, they will decide." He paused. "Whatever happens, know this today: you brought healing to people who needed it. That matters. Even if it cannot save you, it matters." After he left, Clara remained outside, watching the firelit center of camp where her fate was being decided. She thought about Florence Nightingale, her namesake, tending wounded soldiers in Crimea, about her grandmother's garden full of healing herbs, about Mary and James. Too young to run fast enough. The stars wheeled overhead, marking time's passage with celestial indifference. And Clara Nightingale Edison caught between names, between worlds, between healing and harm, waited for dawn and whatever judgment it would bring. The council's decision came with the dawn Clara would live, but she would remain with the band until the larger conflict was resolved. As Lincoln delivered this news, his expression gave away nothing of his own thoughts on the matter. "You are neither prisoner nor free," he explained as they walked through the awakening camp. "You are between, like a bridge between 2 riverbanks, belonging fully to neither side." It was an apt metaphor. In the weeks that followed, Clara found herself occupying exactly that liminal space. She tended the sick and injured, learned Apache healing methods from Victoria, taught what she knew of modern medicine in return. She was watched but not guarded, restricted but not caged. The camp moved twice during those weeks, following patterns she didn't fully understand, something to do with water, grazing, and avoiding army patrols. Clara learned to pack quickly, to ride for hours without complaint, to read the subtle signs that meant they would move again soon. Florence became her constant shadow when not at her own mother's side. The child's arm had healed perfectly, and she'd appointed herself as Clara's teacher in all things Apache. Language lessons delivered with the serious intensity only a 7-year-old could muster. No, Florence corrected one afternoon as they gathered plants together. You say it from here. She patted her chest. Not here, touching her throat. Like when you sing your sad songs when you think no one listens. Clara flushed. She hadn't realized her humming had been observed. They're not sad songs, they're hymns. They sound sad, like you're singing to someone who went away. Florence tilted her head, studying Clara with those two perceptive eyes. Who went away? Everyone, eventually. The words came out more honestly than Clara intended. Florence considered this with the gravity of a child who'd already seen too much loss. Not everyone. Some people come back. Like you went away from your real name, but maybe you'll come back to it. That evening, as Clara helped prepare the communal meal, she'd been gradually included in more daily tasks. She found herself working alongside Lincoln's sister, a woman named Susan, who rarely spoke to her directly. Today, something shifted. You grind the corn wrong, Susan said bluntly. Like this circular. Not pounding. You're making dust, not meal. It was the first direct instruction she'd offered. Clara adjusted her technique, and Susan nodded approval. My brother says you told him true words about your past, Susan continued, not looking up from her own grinding. This is good. Lies are like infection and wounds they spread and poison everything. I've told enough lies, Clara admitted. They didn't protect me anyway. No, lies protect nothing. Only truth can heal, even when truth cuts deep. Susan's hands never paused in their steady rhythm. You carry much shame. It shows in how you move, always making yourself smaller. This is foolish. Clara's hands stilled. You survived. You're here. You heal others. What is shameful in this? Susan finally looked at her directly. The man who hurt you, he carries shame. Or should. Not you. You carry scars. Different thing entirely. They worked in silence after that, but something had loosened in Clara's chest. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks. The next morning brought unexpected chaos. A hunting party returned with news soldiers were moving through the valley below, searching for the band. The camp erupted into controlled urgency, everyone knowing their role in the well-practiced dance of evasion. Clara found herself assigned to help with the children and elderly who couldn't move as quickly. As they prepared to leave, she noticed Grant the warrior, whose infected arm she'd treated, preparing to ride out with the decoy group that would draw the soldiers away. Your arm, she called out. Let me check the binding. He dismounted, impatient but compliant. The wound had healed well, but she rewrapped it anyway, adding extra padding. You fuss like my grandmother. He grumbled, but there was no heat in it. Your grandmother was wise. Listen to her ghost and don't tear these stitches, or I'll sew them twice as tight next time. He actually smiled at that. You sound more Apache every day. White healer, maybe we'll make you one of us yet. The comment stayed with her as they made their careful escape through hidden canyon trails. One of us. She'd never truly been one of any group not in Chicago society where her working-class background showed, not in Elk Creek where her unmarried status and mysterious past set her apart. But here, oddly, despite being a captive, despite the vast cultural gulf, she was finding something that felt dangerously like belonging. They traveled for 2 days, the pace grueling but necessary. Clara rode with the children's group, Florence chattering beside her when the trail allowed, pointing out plants and animal signs and telling stories that mixed Apache tradition with bits of Christianity from the mission school in ways that would probably horrify both sets of teachers. On the second night, they made camp in a sheltered valley with a small spring. Clara was tending to an elderly woman's blistered feet when Lincoln appeared. Walk with me, he said simply. She followed him away from the fires, up a small rise that overlooked the camp. The stars were brilliant overhead, unmarred by clouds or civilization smoke. The soldiers have turned back, he said without preamble. But they'll return. They always do. And Hargrove is offering a bounty for you, specifically claims you're his cousin, taken against your will. Clara let out a bitter laugh. His cousin, I've never... She stopped. Of course, a story to save face, to justify greater violence. What will you do? That depends partly on you. He turned to face her fully. In 3 days, we meet with other bands. There will be discussion of whether to fight or negotiate. Your presence complicates things. Some say we should trade you for guarantees of peace. Others say keeping you invites more trouble. And what do you say? He was quiet for a long moment. I say you have earned your place here through service, but I am one voice among many. He paused. There is another option. You could choose to stay, not as captive, but as one of us. It has been done before, rarely, but it has been done. Clara's breath caught. What would that mean? It would mean choosing this life fully, learning our ways not as a curious outsider, but as someone who belongs. It would mean when the soldiers come, you stand with us, not between us. His eyes held hers steadily. It would mean no more bridges. You would choose your bank of the river. The implications rolled through her like thunder. Everything she'd been raised to be, everything she'd trained for. The entire structure of the world she'd known she would be walking away from all of it. I need time to think. Time is what we lack, but think. Yes, choose with your whole heart, whatever you choose. They walked back to camp in silence. Clara's mind churned with possibilities and impossibilities. Could she really contemplate such a thing, turning her back on her own people, but were they really her people? What had society ever given her but shame and judgment? The next days passed in a blur of movement and routine. Clara threw herself into her work, as if healing could provide clarity. She delivered a baby during a brief stop, the mother gripping her hand and cursing fluently in 3 languages. She set a broken bone, treated snakebite, taught Victoria how to recognize the early signs of pneumonia. And always, Lincoln's words echoed, "Choose your bank of the river." On the night before they were to meet the other bands, Clara found herself unable to sleep. She sat by the banked fire, poking at the coals with a stick and trying to untangle her thoughts. "You think too loud," Victoria said, appearing like a ghost to sit beside her. "I can hear your mind racing from my blankets. Sorry. Don't apologize. Think quieter." But there was warmth in her voice. "You're trying to decide whether to stay." It wasn't a question. Clara nodded. "I hated you when you first came," Victoria said conversationally. "The white woman who saved child killers. I wanted you to suffer as my sister suffered." She was quiet for a moment. "But watching you work, seeing how you are with the children, with our elders, hate is hard to hold when someone tends your grandmother's feet with such care." "I'm still the woman who saved Thomas Hargrove." "Yes. And you're also the woman who saved Grant's arm, who delivered Songbird's baby, who taught us about the invisible sickness that lives in dirty water." Victoria shrugged. "People are more than their worst moment. This is what Lincoln believes. Anyway, what do you believe?" Victoria turned to study her directly. "I believe the past cannot be changed, but I also believe my grandmother was right. Healing is like water. It finds its way, and you have found your way to being useful here, maybe even necessary. But I'm not Apache. I'll never be Apache. No. But Apache isn't only blood. It's choosing to live as we live, to stand with us, to braid your life with ours." Victoria stood. "Lincoln offers you a rare gift, the chance to choose your belonging instead of having it chosen for you by birth. Don't waste it on fear." After she left, Clara remained by the fire. The stars wheeled overhead, marking time's passage. By dawn, she would need to decide, not just about staying or going, but about who she was going to be. She thought about Elk Creek, about the infirmary that was probably ash now, about the people there who needed healing but would always see her as the strange spinster nurse with secrets. She thought about Chicago before that, about Doctor, Wellington and the shame that had driven her west. Then she thought about Florence teaching her Apache words with patient exasperation, about Victoria's growing trust, about Susan's blunt wisdom and Grant's teasing acceptance, about Lincoln, who saw her truly and offered her choice instead of judgment. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Clara made her decision. She found Lincoln preparing his horse for the day's journey. He looked up as she approached, reading her answer in her face before she spoke. "If I stay," she said carefully, "really stay, what would be expected of me? Work, learning, loyalty, the same as anyone." He continued, checking the horse's hooves. "You would need a family to claim you. Mine would. If you're willing." "Your family. But Susan respects courage and useful skills. You have both. She's already started teaching you women's work. That's not done for outsiders." Clara thought about the grinding lesson, the subtle acceptance in that practical instruction. "And you? Why would you claim responsibility for me?" He straightened, meeting her eyes. "Because I see who you are becoming. Because healers are sacred, and we need healing. Because—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "Because something in you calls to something in me. I would not act on that while you are captive. But if you choose freely to stay, then we can see what grows between us without the shadow of captivity over it." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks, but she didn't look away. She'd felt it too, the pull between them. Carefully ignored while her status was uncertain, the respect that had grown into something warmer. The others, will they accept it? A white woman in your family. Some will, some won't, but that's true of any choice worth making. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "The question is not what others will accept. The question is what you choose." Clara took a breath that seemed to come from her toes. "Then I choose to stay. I choose your family, if they'll have me. I choose." She gestured at the camp beginning to wake around them. "This, all of it." Something shifted in Lincoln's expression, a warmth that transformed his usually serious features. "Then welcome home, Clara Nightingale." Hearing her real name on his lips, spoken with such simple acceptance, broke something open in her chest. For the first time in 3 years, maybe for the first time ever, she felt the possibility of being whole. The meeting with the other bands would bring new challenges. There would be those who questioned her presence, who saw her as enemy or liability. The soldiers would keep searching. Hargrove would keep offering bounties. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous. But as the camp woke around them, as Florence came running to show her an interesting beetle she'd found, as Victoria called her to help with morning preparations, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced since before Dr. Wellington's attack. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. That night, after the councils and debates, after she'd been formally accepted into Lincoln's family with ceremonies she only half understood. Clara lay in her new place, no longer apart, but within the family circle. The stars above were the same ones that had watched her flee Chicago. But she was not the same woman who had run. "I pretended cold to keep myself safe," she whispered to those eternal witnesses. But warmth finds its way, like water, like healing. And for the first time in memory, Clara Nightingale slept without dreams of fire or shame, held safe in the circle of her chosen belonging. The morning sickness came like a thief, stealing Clara's breath and balance as she knelt by the stream. She gripped the rocky bank, waiting for the nausea to pass. Her mind counting days with the mechanical precision of someone trained in medicine. 6 weeks since she'd chosen to stay. 6 weeks since that night when she and Lincoln had finally allowed themselves to act on what had been growing between them. "You're pale as winter frost," Victoria observed, appearing beside her with a knowing look. "How long—" Clara wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "I'm not certain. Perhaps—" "You're certain. I can see it in your eyes." Victoria crouched beside her, studying her face with the clinical assessment of a fellow healer. "Does he know?" "Not yet." Clara's hand moved unconsciously to her still flat belly. "I wasn't sure myself until this week." Victoria made a sound that might have been sympathy or amusement. "Well, you certainly chose to braid your life with ours completely. A child seals choices in ways words cannot." They were camped near a trading post, one of the few places where Apache could still exchange goods without immediate hostility. It was risky traders meant gossip, and gossip traveled faster than horses in the frontier. But winter was coming, and they needed supplies. Clara had been kept away from the post itself, her presence still too complicated to explain to outsiders. But as she straightened from the stream, she saw riders approaching the camp, not their own people returning from trade, but strangers. White men. "Inside," Victoria said sharply, but it was too late. One of the riders had already spotted them. "Well, I'll be damned," the man called out, spurring his horse closer. "That's her. That's the Edison woman." Clara's blood turned to ice. She recognized him, Samuel Colt, one of Hargrove's ranch hands. Young, impulsive, and loyal as a dog to his employer. Lincoln materialized between them and the riders, along with Grant and several other warriors. Weapons weren't drawn, but hands rested meaningfully on them. "You're in our camp," Lincoln said calmly. "State your business." "Our business is with her." Colt pointed at Clara. "Caleb Hargrove's cousin. Taken in your raid. There's a reward, $500 for her safe return." "I'm no cousin to Caleb Hargrove," Clara said, stepping forward despite Victoria's restraining hand. "And I wasn't taken. I choose to be here." Colt's eyes widened. "Ma'am, you don't have to lie. We know they got you. Everyone knows. The whole territory's talking about the poor nurse kidnapped by savages." "Then everyone is wrong." Clara lifted her chin. "I'm here by choice. I've been adopted into this band. This is my family now." The younger ranch hand with Colt, she didn't recognize him, spat to the side. "Adopted?" "That's what they call it when a white woman goes native, when she forgets her own kind." "Careful with your words," Lincoln warned softly. But Colt was staring at Clara with a mixture of disgust and fascination. His eyes traveled over her Apache dress, her sun-darkened skin, the way she stood naturally among the people around her. "My God, it's true then. What they're saying in the settlements. You're living as one of them. Willingly. As I said, by choice." "Choice?" He shook his head. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand. People are talking, saying things about you that no decent woman would want said. Hargrove's offering money. But others are saying maybe you don't want saving. That maybe you're—" He colored slightly. "Well, that you've taken up with one of them." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "What people say is their concern, not mine. It should be your concern." Colt leaned forward in his saddle. "You can still come back. Hargrove will take you in. Say whatever needs saying to fix your reputation. But if you stay here, if people find out you're here willingly, there won't be any going back, ever. You'll be dead to decent society." "Then I'll be dead to decent society." The words came out firm. "Certain. Tell Mr. Hargrove thank you for his concern. But I'm where I belong." The younger man made a disgusted noise. "Leave her, Sam. She's made her bed. Let her lie in it. Literally, from the looks of things." Lincoln moved so fast Clara barely saw it. The man was yanked from his horse, Lincoln's knife at his throat before anyone could react. "You insult a woman under my protection," Lincoln said, still in that deadly calm voice. "In our camp, speaking words that would earn you death if she were your own sister. Give me one reason not to take payment for that insult in blood." "Lincoln?" Clara touched his arm lightly. "Let him go. He's young and stupid, not worth the trouble it would bring." For a moment, she thought he wouldn't listen. Then, slowly, he released the man, shoving him back toward his horse. "Leave," Lincoln commanded. "Tell Hargrove his cousin is well and chooses her own path. Tell him if he sends men here again, they won't leave breathing." Colt helped his companion mount, his face troubled. "Miss Edison, Miss Clara, this ain't right. You're not thinking clear. These people, they're not— You can't just become one of them." "Watch me," Clara said quietly. After they left, the camp was tense with the knowledge that their location was compromised. They would need to move again, soon, but first, there were heated discussions among the band's leaders. "She brings danger," one of the elder men argued. "The whites will come for her, bring soldiers. They come anyway." Grant countered. with or without her. But now they have reason. A white woman living with us willingly. They'll say we corrupted her, used Apache magic to steal her mind. This from Thomas Jefferson, one of the most traditional voices in the council. It gives them excuse for violence. Clara sat with the women, officially excluded from the men's council but able to hear every word. Susan sat beside her, solid and reassuring. "You're very quiet for someone whose fate is being decided," Susan observed. "I spoke my choice to those men. That's all I can do." "Is it?" Susan gave her a penetrating look. "You carry Lincoln's child. That changes things." Clara's hand flew to her belly. "How did you—" "I have eyes, and I've had 6 children myself. I know the signs." Susan's weathered face softened slightly. "This is why you were sick by the stream." "Yes, a child of 2 worlds." Susan was quiet for a moment. "It will not be easy. The child will belong fully to neither, always standing between, like you." "Or belonging to both," Clara suggested softly. "Bridging instead of choosing." Susan made a non-committal sound. "Perhaps, if the world allows such bridges to stand." The council continued late into the night. Clara dozed fitfully, waking to the sound of approaching horses. Not the earlier riders' too many hooves, moving with military precision. "Soldiers," someone hissed, and the camp exploded into motion. But these weren't regular army. As they rode into the firelight, Clara recognized the lead figure, Marshal Benjamin Franklin from Elk Creek, accompanied by a small detachment of cavalry and, to her horror, Caleb Hargrove himself. "Hold," Franklin called out, hands raised to show peaceful intent. "We're here to talk, not fight." Lincoln stepped forward, every line of his body ready for violence. "Talk then, but know that any aggression will be met tenfold." "We're here for Miss Edison," Franklin said, his eyes finding Clara in the crowd. "Miss Clara? Are you well? Are you here of your own free will?" Before Clara could answer, Hargrove pushed forward. "Of course she's not. Look at her dressed like a squaw. Probably drugged or threatened." "I'm here by choice." Clara interrupted, stepping into the firelight. "Marshal Franklin, I appreciate your concern, but I'm well. I've chosen to stay with these people. They're my family now." Franklin's weathered face showed genuine confusion. "Miss Clara, I don't understand. You had a life in Elk Creek. Purpose. Why would you—" "The life where I healed men who murdered children." Clara's voice carried more bite than she intended. "Where I was the spinster nurse with shameful secrets, good enough to tend wounds but not good enough to truly belong." "You belonged," Franklin protested. "People respected you. Respected my usefulness." Clara corrected. "There's a difference." Hargrove had been staring at her with growing disgust. "My God, the rumors are true. You've actually bedded down with one of them. Forgotten everything civilized society taught you. Civilized society taught me that powerful men can do what they want to women like me." Clara shot back. "That healing the right people matters more than justice. That belonging is conditional on hiding who you are. So yes, I've forgotten those lessons gladly." "You're hysterical," Hargrove declared. "Clearly these savages have—" "Choose your next words very carefully," Lincoln warned, his hand on his knife. Franklin held up a hand. "Enough, Miss Clara. If you're truly here by choice, we'll respect that. But understand, if you stay, you're choosing to be outside the law's protection. If something happens to you here, then it happens. I understand the consequences of my choice." Franklin studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I'll report that you're here willingly. God help you, but that's your choice to make." But Hargrove wasn't finished. His face had turned an ugly red in the firelight. "You can't just let her go. She knows things about the town, about our defenses. She's a traitor to her own kind." "She's a healer who chose a different path," Franklin said tiredly. "Leave it be, Caleb. Leave it be." Hargrove's voice rose. "My brother's men died in their raids, and she's here warming their beds. Probably telling them everything. The crack of Clara's palm against his cheek echoed in the sudden silence. Hargrove stared at her, shock replacing rage. "Your brother's men died after murdering children," Clara said, her voice deadly quiet. "After burning families out of their homes. You want to talk about choosing sides? I choose the side that doesn't slaughter innocents and call it civilization." Hargrove raised his hand as if to strike her back, but Lincoln's knife was at his throat before he could complete the motion. "Touch her and lose the hand," Lincoln said conversationally. "Try to hurt her. Lose your life. She is under my protection, carrying my child, by your own laws and ours. That makes her mine to defend." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Clara saw the exact moment understanding dawned on the white men's faces, saw their expressions shift from confusion to disgust to something uglier. "Pregnant," Hargrove breathed. "With a savage's mongrel. You're not just a traitor, you're an abomination." "That's enough." Franklin's voice carried the authority of years wearing a badge. "We're leaving now." He looked at Clara one last time. "I pray you don't regret this choice, Miss Clara, but it's yours to make. Boys, mount up." As they prepared to leave, Colt, who'd remained silent through the confrontation, suddenly spurred his horse forward. "Miss Clara, wait." He tossed something that landed at her feet. Her medical bag, battered but intact. "Saved it from the infirmary fire," he said quietly. Thought maybe you'd want it, even if you are." "Oh," he shrugged, unable to finish. "Thank you," Clara said, genuinely touched. He nodded once, then followed the others into the darkness. After they left, the camp was silent. Clara could feel the weight of eyes on her, not just from her adopted family, but from the other bands who'd witnessed the confrontation. "Well," Victoria said finally, "you certainly burned that bridge thoroughly. It was already ash," Clara replied, suddenly exhausted. "I just acknowledged it." Lincoln's hand found her shoulder. "You spoke well, but now they know you carry a child. That'll complicate things." "Everything about me complicates things," Clara said wryly. "What's one more complication?" But she knew it wasn't that simple. A child meant she couldn't ride as hard, couldn't help with quick escapes. It made her more vulnerable and, by extension, made the band more vulnerable for protecting her. Thomas Jefferson stood from the council fire. "The white woman has chosen. Let all witness she stands with us freely, accepts our ways, carries one of our children, by the old laws. That makes her one of us. Any who challenge this, challenge me." It wasn't unanimous approval. Clara could see doubt in some faces, resignation in others. But it was acceptance, of a sort. That night, as the camp settled into uneasy sleep, Clara sat with Lincoln outside their shelter. Her medical bag lay between them, a tangible link to the life she'd formerly rejected. "Regrets?" he asked softly. "No?" She leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Fear, yes. Uncertainty, yes, but not regret. They'll come again, maybe with more soldiers. Your choice today makes you an enemy to them." "I was already an enemy. I just didn't know it." She placed his hand on her still flat belly. "This child, our child, deserves better than the world they offer. Maybe here, between worlds, we can build something new." Lincoln covered her hand with his. "Between worlds is a hard place to live. Then we'll make it easier for those who come after, starting with this one." The stars watched overhead, silent witnesses to choices that couldn't be undone. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled that wild sound that belonged to no civilization but the oldest one of all. Clara Nightingale, who had been Clara Edison, who was now something altogether new, closed her eyes and listened to the night. She'd chosen her path. Now all that remained was to walk it, wherever it led. The dust storm came first, a brown wall that swallowed the horizon and turned day to twilight. Clara pulled her shawl over her face, tasting grit with every breath as she helped secure supplies and comfort frightened children. 7 months pregnant now. Her movements were careful but still capable, her expanded belly a visible reminder of the choices that had brought them all to this moment. Through the howling wind, She heard them before she saw them horses. Too many to count. Their hoofbeats a thunder that rivaled the storm. Lincoln appeared at her side, pressing a rifle into her hands. "Can you still shoot?" "Well enough." She'd learned in the past months, necessity overcoming her healer's reluctance to hold weapons. "How many?" 40, maybe 50. Hargrove brought everyone he could gather. His face was grim beneath the dust. "Stay with the children and elders. If things go badly—" "They won't." She gripped his arm. "We've prepared for this." He kissed her forehead quickly, then was gone, rallying the warriors. Clara made her way to the designated shelter where the vulnerable were gathering. Florence ran to her, eyes wide with fear she was trying not to show. "Miss Clara, are we going to die?" "No, little one. We're going to be smart and brave, just like you taught me to be." Clara checked her rifle, then the medical supplies she'd prepared. "Remember what we practiced?" The girl nodded, clutching the small bag of bandages she'd been given to carry. Even the children had roles in their defense. The storm was breaking as Hargrove's force arrived, the dust settling enough to reveal the full scope of the threat. Not just ranch hands this time, but mercenaries, bounty hunters. And Clara's heart sank a handful of soldiers who were clearly acting outside official orders. Lincoln Roosevelt Hargrove's voice carried across the space between the two forces. "Send out the white woman and we'll leave peacefully. Keep her, and we'll take her anyway, along with anyone who stands in our way." Lincoln emerged from cover, Grant and Washington flanking him. "Clara Nightingale is one of us. She carries my child. By all laws, yours and ours, she is under our protection." "Laws," Hargrove spat. "You dare speak of laws? You're harboring a traitor and a The shot came from Clara's rifle, sending up a spray of dirt inches from Hargrove's horse. The animal reared, nearly unseating him. "The next one won't miss," Clara called out, standing despite Victoria's attempt to pull her back down. "I'm a better shot than I was a year ago. Mr. Hargrove, Apache teachers are thorough. Clara Edison. Nightingale. Clara Nightingale. I took back my real name when I chose my real family." She kept the rifle steady despite the weight of her pregnancy. "You want to talk about law? Let's talk about the murders your brother committed, the children he killed, the families burned out of their homes. So, lies spread by savages, truth witnessed by traitors, documented by the army, known by anyone with eyes to see." Clara's voice carried the authority of someone who had nothing left to lose. "I have letters, Mr. Hargrove, from Sam Colt. Of all people, his conscience finally got the better of him. He wrote down everything: dates, places, names of the dead. That was a partial truth. Colt had sent word through traitors, warning of Hargrove's building force and including some damning details about past raids. Whether it counted as full documentation was debatable, but Hargrove didn't know that. Even if that were true, Hargrove recovered. It doesn't change what you are. A white woman who turned her back on her own kind, who spreads her legs for a savage. This time the shot came from Lincoln's rifle, taking Hargrove's hat clean off his head. "The next man who speaks such words about my wife dies. That is the only warning." Wife. They'd had a ceremony 2 months ago, Apache custom binding them in the eyes of the band. Clara felt the word warm her, even in the midst of danger. "Enough of this." One of the mercenaries pushed forward. Clara recognized him as Julius Caesar Thompson, a man with a reputation for violence that preceded him like a dark cloud. "We came for the woman and the bounty. All this talking is wasting daylight." He raised his rifle, and everything happened at once. Florence's mother, Marie, saw the trajectory of Thompson's aim directly at Clara. Without hesitation, she threw herself forward, taking the bullet meant for the white woman who had become family. She crumpled with a cry that was lost in the eruption of gunfire from both sides. "No!" Clara dropped her rifle, rushing to Marie despite the bullets flying overhead. Her hands found the wound chest, bleeding badly, but missing the heart by inches. "Stay down!" Victoria dragged her behind cover as the battle raged. "You can't help if you're dead." But Clara was already working, pressing bandages to the wound. shouting instructions to Florence, who had appeared with the medical supplies. The girl's face was white with terror, but her hands were steady as she helped. The fighting was brutal but brief. Lincoln's warriors knew the terrain, had planned for this. Hargrove's larger force found themselves caught in crossfire, their numerical advantage meaningless in the canyon's confines. Through it all, Clara worked, not just on Marie, but on wounded from both sides as they fell. An Apache warrior with a gut wound, one of Hargrove's men with a shattered leg. She made no distinction, falling back on the oath that had guided her before all this started. Heal who needs healing. "What are you doing?" The wounded ranch hand stared at her as she tied off his tourniquet. "I came here to kill you, and I'm here to heal. Seems we're both bad at our jobs today." She moved to the next wounded, leaving him speechless. The tide turned when Marshal Franklin arrived with a full cavalry unit official this time, with orders to stop the vigilante action. The shooting stuttered to a halt as blue uniforms filled the canyon. "Stand down, all of you." Franklin's voice carried the weight of federal authority. "Caleb Hargrove, you're under arrest for leading an illegal military action. The rest of you, drop your weapons. You can't arrest me for trying to rescue a white woman from savages," Hargrove protested even as soldiers surrounded him. "I can and I will. We've been investigating your brother's raids for months. Seems Miss Clara was right, he did murder those children. We found witnesses, evidence, and now you've led an illegal attack on peaceful Apache who have treaty rights to this land." Clara barely heard the arguments that followed. She was focused on Marie, who was conscious but weak, gripping her daughter's hand. "You saved me," Marie whispered. "You saved me first." Clara replied, not trusting her voice to remain steady. "Florence, tell your mother she needs to rest. No talking." As the situation resolved, Hargrove's men disarmed. The worst offenders arrested. Franklin approached Clara. She was covered in blood, most of it not her own, still working despite her obvious exhaustion. "Miss Clara, or should I say Mrs. Roosevelt now?" "Either works." She didn't look up from the wound she was suturing. "If you're here to convince me to leave again." "I'm not. I'm here because Colt's information helped us finally build a case against the Hargroves. Thought you should know Thomas Hargrove will hang for those murders. Caleb will serve time for this attack." He paused. "You could come testify, help ensure justice is done." Clara finally looked up. "Would my testimony be accepted, a woman who went native, carrying an Apache child?" Franklin's weathered face was honest. "I don't know, but it might help." She considered, then shook her head. "My place is here, but I'll write everything I know, have it witnessed and notarized. Send someone trustworthy, and I'll provide what documentation I can." He nodded slowly. "You've changed, Miss Clara, harder and softer at the same time, if that makes sense. Life does that." She turned back to her patient. "Marshal, there are wounded here who need transport to proper facilities, Apache and white both. Will you help?" "Already arranging it." He hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think I understand now. Why you stayed. These people, they're not what we were told. People rarely are." As Franklin organized the aftermath, Clara found a moment to rest. Lincoln appeared beside her, touching her belly gently. "You took a foolish risk, standing up like that. I was behind cover, mostly." She leaned into him, exhausted. "Is it over? This battle?" "Yes, the war," he shrugged. "That continues. But today we won something. Recognition, rights, maybe even some justice." Julius Caesar Thompson was brought past in chains, cursing viciously. He spat in Clara's direction. "Traitor bitch! You'll birth a mongrel and die in the dirt like the savage you've become." Clara straightened, meeting his glare steadily. "Perhaps, but I'll die free, having chosen my own path. Can you say the same?" He had no answer to that. As the sun set, painting the canyon in shades of blood and gold, Clara did a final round of the wounded. Apache and white lay side by side in the makeshift field hospital. tended by healers from both cultures. It was, she thought, what the world could be if people chose healing over hatred. Young Napoleon Jones, who'd ridden with Hargrove but taken a bullet in the leg, caught her hand as she checked his bandages. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what I said before, for all of it." Apology accepted. She adjusted his splint. "Pain is a teacher, Mr. Jones. Learn from it." That sounds like something my grandmother would say. Grandmothers are wise the world over. That night, as the camp settled into exhausted quiet, Clara found herself at the center of a different kind of council. Not just Lincoln's band, but leaders from several groups who'd come to witness the day's events. "The white woman fought for us," one elder said. "Healed our enemies even as they tried to kill her. This is power. Power that brings danger," Thomas Jefferson countered, though with less venom than before. "Today we won. Tomorrow they may come with more soldiers." "They come anyway," Grant said firmly. "At least now we have witnesses. The marshal saw who attacked first. He saw Clara healing both sides. That matters in their courts. And she carries a child of two worlds." Susan added, "Perhaps that child will help bridge what we cannot." The debate continued, but Clara could feel the shift. She was no longer just tolerated or provisionally accepted. She had bled for them, risked her child for them, proven that her choice was complete. Victoria squeezed her shoulder. "You did well today. My grandmother would have been proud. I just did what needed doing." Yes, that's why she would have been proud. Later, in their shelter, Lincoln held her as she finally allowed herself to cry for Marie, who'd almost died protecting her. For the wounded on both sides. For the violence that seemed never to end. "I'm a healer," she whispered. "I'm supposed to fix things, not be the cause of bloodshed. You didn't cause this. Hatred and greed caused this. You just refused to let them win." He touched her belly. "This child will know both worlds. Clara will see that bridges are possible. That's worth fighting for." The baby kicked as if in agreement, and Clara managed a watery smile. "Active tonight. I think the gunfire woke them. A warrior already, or perhaps a healer. Maybe both." "Both," Clara agreed. "Definitely both." Outside, the stars wheeled on, indifferent to human struggles. But in the Apache camp, something had changed. A white woman had stood with them, bled with them, healed enemy and friend alike. It wasn't the end of prejudice or violence. Clara wasn't naive enough to believe that. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, Clara had learned, were what you made of them. The news traveled faster than wildfire across the frontier. Thomas Hargrove had been found guilty of murdering Apache children and would hang within the month. His brother Caleb received 10 years hard labor for leading the vigilante raid. Clara received this information from a trader while grinding corn with Susan, her movements made awkward by her expanding belly. "Justice," Susan said, testing the word like unfamiliar food. "From white man's courts. I never thought to see it. Partial justice," Clara corrected, pausing to ease her aching back. "The children are still dead. The families still grieve, but it's something." 2 weeks later, as autumn painted the canyon walls in shades of rust and gold, Clara's labor began. It started slowly, a tightening she initially dismissed as the false pains she'd been experiencing. But as the sun reached its zenith, Victoria took one look at her face and began issuing orders. "Florence, fetch the birthing bundle. Grant, tell Lincoln his child has decided to come. You," she pointed at a young woman, "start water boiling." Clara found herself in the birthing shelter, surrounded by women who had become her sisters in all but blood. Susan directed with calm authority, while Victoria prepared the herbs that would ease pain and prevent excessive bleeding. "I've delivered dozens of babies," Clara panted between contractions. "Why am I terrified now? Because now you're the one doing the work," Susan replied pragmatically. "Less talking, more breathing." Lincoln appeared at the shelter entrance, his usual composure cracked with worry. Susan blocked his path with the immovable force of tradition. "Men wait outside. even chiefs who think they know better. He began. You need to let us work. Go, pace, worry. Pray to whatever spirits listen to you, but do it elsewhere. As the hours passed, Clara discovered the vast difference between delivering babies and having one. The pain came in waves that threatened to drown her, each one stronger than the last. She gripped Victoria's hands, biting down on the leather strap Susan offered, trying to remember her own advice to laboring mothers. You fight it too much, Marie said softly. She had recovered from her gunshot wound, though she still moved carefully. Let your body lead. It knows the way. Between contractions, Clara found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From Chicago's shame to Elk Creek's false refuge to this Apache birthing shelter, each step had been pain transforming into something else: growth, understanding, belonging. I see the head, Victoria announced. Dark hair, like the father. Now, when the next pain comes, push with everything you have. Clara had helped bring life into the world so many times, but being the vessel herself was entirely different. She felt split open, remade, destroyed, and reborn in the same moment. Then, with a final effort that seemed to pull from her very soul, the baby emerged into Victoria's waiting hands. A girl, Victoria said, clearing the infant's mouth and nose with practiced efficiency. Small but fierce. Listen to those lungs. The baby's cry was indeed impressive, a sound of pure life that brought tears to Clara's eyes. Lincoln was allowed in then, his face soft with wonder as Victoria placed the baby on Clara's chest. Our daughter, Clara whispered, touching the tiny fingers that gripped with surprising strength. What should we name her? They had discussed this, the importance of a name that could bridge worlds. Lincoln touched the baby's cheek with one gentle finger. Elizabeth, he said finally. Elizabeth Freedom Roosevelt, a strong name from your people, with a middle name that speaks to what we hope she'll always have. Freedom, Clara repeated, watching her daughter root instinctively. Yes, that's perfect. The days that followed blurred together in the exhaustion and wonder of new motherhood. Clara discovered that while she knew the theory of infant care, the practice with her own child was entirely different. Elizabeth already shortened to Lizzie by Florence, and the other children was a demanding baby who seemed to have inherited her parents' strong wills. She's loud for one so small, Susan observed during one particularly vocal night. Good. She'll need to be heard in this world. As Clara recovered, she was touched by the stream of visitors, not just from their band, but from others who had heard about the white woman who stood and fought with the Apache. They brought gifts, a cradle board decorated with beads, soft rabbit skin blankets, protective amulets. One unexpected visitor was Sam Colt, arriving with a small cavalry escort. Clara received him outside her shelter, Lizzie sleeping against her chest in a sling Victoria had showed her how to use. Miss Clara Mrs. Roosevelt, he corrected himself, hat in hand. I came to apologize and to see if you needed anything. Your information helped bring justice, Clara said carefully. That matters more than words. Still, he shifted uncomfortably. I rode with them at first, believed the lies. It wasn't until I saw what they really were. He trailed off, then reached into his saddlebag. I brought something from your old place in Elk Creek. He produced a small leather journal, smoke-damaged but intact. Clara recognized it immediately. Her medical notes from her first year in the territory, including treatments she'd developed combining traditional and modern methods. Thought you might want it for your work here. Clara accepted it with hands that trembled slightly. Thank you, Sam. This means more than you know. There's more. Doc Harrison from Fort Grant, he's heard about what you're doing here, mixing Apache medicine with modern techniques. He wants to know if you'd write up your findings. Says it could save lives on both sides. I'll consider it, Clara said, though she was already mentally organizing the treatise. Sam, what happened to the others after the raid? Napoleon's leg healed clean. He tells everyone who'll listen how an Apache healer saved it. Some others, they're rethinking things. Not everyone, but some. He glanced around the camp. It's not what we expected. This place, these people, you saw that before the rest of us. After he left, Clara sat with Lincoln, watching Lizzie sleep between them. The baby's skin was a perfect blend of their tones, her features already showing the strength of both heritages. She'll face challenges, Lincoln said quietly, not fully accepted by either world, or claimed by both. Clara countered. Things are changing, slowly. Marshal Franklin told me there's talk of new treaties. Real ones this time. Recognition of land rights. Maybe by the time she's grown. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced, but he smiled at their daughter's small yawn. Either way, she'll be ready. With you as her mother. How could she not be? Clara began working on the medical treatise, writing during Lizzie's naps. She documented the use of willow bark for pain, the antiseptic properties of certain desert plants, the Apache methods for treating snakebite that had proven more effective than anything in her training. She wrote about birthing practices that reduced infant mortality, about herbs that fought infection, about the holistic approach that treated the spirit along with the body. Victoria contributed her knowledge freely, as did other healers who visited. They were creating something new, a blend of traditions that took the best from both worlds. My grandmother would have loved this, Victoria said one evening, reviewing Clara's notes. She always said healing knowledge should flow like water, finding its own level. The winter came gently that year, bringing needed moisture without the brutal storms that could devastate. Clara learned to strap Lizzie to her back Apache style, keeping her daughter warm while she worked. The baby seemed to thrive on the constant motion and contact, growing round and healthy on Clara's milk and the love of an entire community. Not everyone accepted their presence easily. There were still those who muttered about bad medicine, about the danger of keeping a white woman and her half-blood child. But as Clara continued her work, healing without distinction, teaching what she knew, learning constantly, the mutters grew quieter. One morning, Clara woke to find a small gift outside their shelter, a pair of tiny moccasins, beautifully beaded. No note, but she recognized the work of Thomas Jefferson's wife, one of the most traditional women in the band. Acceptance, Lincoln said when she showed him. Slow, perhaps grudging, but real. For Lizzie, if not for me, for both. Those moccasins took hours of work. That effort isn't spent on those who don't belong. Spring's arrival brought traders with news from the outside world. The medical treatise Clara had sent with Doc Harrison was causing a sensation in certain circles. Requests came for more information, for possible exchanges of knowledge. One letter particularly caught her attention from a doctor, Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to receive a medical degree in America. She wants to correspond, Clara told Lincoln, hardly believing it. To learn about combining traditional and modern healing methods. She's working with immigrant communities in New York, trying to bridge similar gaps. Will you? Yes, I think I will. Clara looked at Lizzie, now 6 months old and trying determinedly to crawl. I want her to grow up in a world where bridges are normal, not extraordinary. The work was slow, sometimes frustrating. Letters took months to travel back and forth. Not everyone was ready to accept that healing could come from unexpected sources, but gradually. Clara found herself at the center of a small but growing network of doctors interested in traditional methods, native healers curious about modern techniques, missionaries who had learned that forcing change rarely worked as well as respectful exchange. Through it all, Lizzie grew. She spoke her first words in a mixture of Apache and English, crawled with determination that reminded everyone of her parents, and charmed even the sternest elders with her ready smile. She's going to be trouble, Susan predicted, watching Lizzie attempt to follow Florence on some adventure. Too smart, too curious, too willing to challenge, like her mother. I'll take that as a compliment. Clara replied, catching her daughter before she could eat a particularly interesting beetle. It was meant as one. This world needs troublemakers, the right kind. As summer approached, bringing with it Lizzie's first birthday, Clara reflected on the year that had passed. She'd given birth between worlds and raised her daughter as a bridge. She'd continued her work, expanded it even, creating connections that might outlast any treaty. "Do you regret it?" Lincoln asked one evening as they watched Lizzie take her first wobbling steps. "The life you might have had," Clara considered. "In another life, she might have remained in Elk Creek, healing bodies while hiding her own wounds. She might have eventually married some widower who needed a mother for his children, lived a life of quiet utility and buried shame. Instead, she had a partner who saw her truly, a daughter who would grow up belonging to multiple worlds, work that mattered in ways she'd never imagined possible. "No," she said simply. "No regrets, only gratitude." Lizzie tottered between them, babbling in her mixture of languages, reaching for both parents with equal love. In her, Clara saw the future complicated, challenging, but full of possibility. The stars came out overhead, the same ones that had watched her journey from shame to belonging. But now Clara rarely looked at them. She was too busy looking forward, building the world her daughter would inherit, one healing at a time. 5 years had passed like seasons in the desert, sometimes harsh, sometimes gentle, always transforming the landscape in subtle ways. Clara stood at the entrance of the healing lodge she'd helped build, a structure that combined Apache tradition with modern medical knowledge. Through the doorway, she could see Lizzie helping Victoria organize herbs, her small hands careful and precise despite her young age. "Mama, Aunt Victoria says I sorted these wrong," Lizzie called out in her unique blend of Apache and English. "But I think sage and desert willow should go together because they both help with fever." "That's good thinking, little healer," Clara replied, entering to inspect her daughter's work. "What else do they have in common?" Lizzie's face scrunched in concentration, an expression that was pure Lincoln. "They both grow near water." "Very good. Understanding where medicine grows helps us understand how to use it." The healing lodge had become more than Clara had ever envisioned. What started as a simple shelter for treating the sick had grown into a center of learning. Young people from multiple bands came to study, and occasionally, brave souls from the settlements arrived seeking knowledge that couldn't be found in Eastern medical schools. Today was special. A formal delegation from Fort Grant was arriving to discuss establishing a permanent medical exchange program. Doc Harrison had been advocating for it for years, and finally, the territorial government was listening. "You're nervous," Victoria observed, watching Clara adjust her appearance for the third time. She wore a dress that Susan had made a blend of Apache styling with practical American elements, perfectly representing who she'd become. "Aren't you? This could change everything." "Change is like birth," Victoria said philosophically. "Painful, messy, but sometimes necessary. Besides, look what change brought us." She gestured toward Lizzie, who was now teaching Florence's younger brother how to identify medicinal plants. The delegation arrived at midday. Doc Harrison, Marshal Franklin now wearing a federal badge, and, surprisingly, Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell herself, having traveled from New York specifically for this meeting. "Mrs. Roosevelt." "Doctor," Blackwell extended her hand warmly. "Your letters have been illuminating. I had to see your work for myself." Clara gave them a tour of the facilities, the healing lodge, with its combination of traditional Apache design and modern sanitation principles. The herb garden, where medicinal plants grew in careful rows. The teaching area where she and Victoria demonstrated techniques to eager students. "Remarkable, Doctor," Blackwell murmured, watching Victoria show a young Apache man how to properly clean a wound using both boiled water and crushed manzanita leaves. "The integration is seamless. It took time," Clara admitted, trust on both sides. "But healing speaks a universal language." Lincoln joined them for the formal discussions, bringing several other band leaders, including Thomas Jefferson, who had become one of Clara's unexpected supporters over the years. "What you propose is not simple." Jefferson said to the delegation, "Our medicine is sacred knowledge, passed down through generations. To share it freely, not freely." Clara interjected respectfully. With respect, with acknowledgement, with reciprocity, Apache healers would learn modern surgical techniques, anatomy, new treatments. Settlement doctors would learn plant medicine, holistic healing, treatments that have worked for centuries. And the children, Doctor? Blackwell asked. Those of mixed heritage, like your daughter, would have a place in both worlds. Lincoln answered firmly, no longer forced to choose, but able to bridge. The negotiations continued for hours. There were concerns about protecting sacred knowledge, about preventing exploitation, about ensuring equal exchange rather than one-sided taking. Clara found herself translating not just languages, but concepts, helping each side understand the other's concerns. As the sun began to set, an agreement was reached. A formal medical exchange would be established, with Clara's healing lodge as the central point. Apache healers would be recognized as legitimate medical practitioners within the program. Written documentation would be carefully controlled, with both sides having say over what knowledge could be shared publicly. This is just the beginning, Doc Harrison said, shaking Lincoln's hand. But it's a good beginning. That evening, the camp celebrated with a feast. Clara watched Lizzie play with children of all backgrounds, Apache, Mexican, and even a few from the fort who'd come with their parents. They played together without thought to the divisions that separated their elders, switching languages mid-sentence, sharing toys and stories with equal ease. She makes it look simple, Marshall Franklin commented, standing beside Clara. The bridging. Children usually do. It's adults who complicate things. Speaking of complications, Franklin cleared his throat. There's something you should know. There's been an inquiry back east about you. Someone claiming to be looking for Clara Nightingale, who disappeared from Chicago 6 years ago. Clara's blood chilled. After all this time, the past still had claws. Who? A Dr. Wellington. Says he's concerned about a former student who left under mysterious circumstances. The name hit her like a physical blow. She must have swayed because Franklin steadied her with a hand on her elbow. I take it this isn't welcome news. He's the reason I left Chicago, Clara said quietly. The reason I changed my name? Franklin's weathered face hardened. I see. Well, officially, I've never heard of any Clara Nightingale. Clara Roosevelt, on the other hand, is a respected healer and citizen of the territory, married to a prominent Apache leader, mother to an American citizen. Different person entirely. The simple declaration of protection, offered without question or judgment, brought tears to Clara's eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Roosevelt. Your work here, it's changing things, slowly, but real change always is. Later that night, Clara told Lincoln about Wellington's inquiry. He listened in silence, his face revealing nothing until she finished. Do you think he'll come here? I don't know. Maybe he's persistent when he wants something. Then he'll find you're no longer alone. Lincoln's voice carried quiet menace. You're not the frightened girl who ran from Chicago. You're a healer, a mother, a bridge between worlds. And you have a husband who would face any threat to protect you. I don't want violence. Neither do I. But some men only understand strength. He pulled her close. You've built something important here. Clara, I won't let shadows from the past destroy it. The next morning brought a surprise visitor, Napoleon Jones, the young ranch hand who'd once ridden with Hargrove. He arrived alone, nervous but determined. Mrs. Roosevelt, he said, hat in hand, I heard about the medical program. I'd like to learn, if you'll have me. Clara studied him. He'd grown in 5 years, no longer the angry boy who'd spat insults at her choice. Why? Because I've seen what hatred brings, nothing but blood and sorrow. And I've seen what you've built here, healing that doesn't care about skin color or language. He met her eyes directly. I want to be part of building, not destroying. It won't be easy. You'll face judgment from both sides. You did it. Figure I can too. And so Napoleon became her first official student from the settlements, working alongside Apache youth to learn the combined healing arts. His presence caused ripples, but also opened doors other young people from the settlements began to inquire, curious about learning medicine that drew from multiple traditions. One afternoon, as Clara taught a mixed class about treating childhood diseases, Lizzie interrupted with important news. "Mama, there's a strange man asking about you at the trading post. He has city clothes and a mean face." Clara's heart skipped, but she kept her voice calm. "Thank you, little scout. Go find your father, please." Wellington. It had to be. After all these years, he'd finally tracked her down. She found him at the trading post, looking thoroughly out of place in his Eastern suit, sweat staining his collar. He'd aged poorly. She noted clinically the hardness that had always been in him now written clearly on his face. "Clara," he said, attempting charm. "My dear student, I've been so worried about you. Dr. Wellington." She kept her distance, aware that Lincoln and several warriors had materialized nearby. "I'm surprised you'd travel so far out of concern for a former student. Not just any student, my most promising one. When you left so suddenly, without explanation..." He stepped closer, and she caught the familiar scent of his cologne, triggering memories she'd buried. "I've come to bring you home. Chicago has forgotten that unfortunate misunderstanding. You could resume your studies, your proper place in society." "My proper place?" Clara almost laughed. "And what place would that be? Doctor under your thumb, bearing your abuse in silence, grateful for whatever crumbs of knowledge you chose to share." His face darkened. "I see the savages have filled your head with lies. You always were too impressionable, but it's not too late. Come back with me, and all will be forgiven." "There's nothing to forgive. I've built a life here, a real life, with purpose and respect and love." She gestured to the healing lodge visible in the distance. "I've created something Chicago's medical establishment couldn't imagine: true integration of healing traditions. My work is published, respected, saving lives. Playing nurse to savages isn't real medicine." Wellington sneered. "And this arrangement you have? Did you really think I wouldn't hear about your half-breed bastard, that I'd let my prize student degrade herself?" The knife appeared at his throat before he could finish, Lincoln's movement too fast to follow. "Last man who spoke such words about my wife and daughter lost his freedom for 10 years, Lincoln said conversationally. "You're not under territorial justice here. Apache justice is different." "Lincoln." Clara touched his arm gently. "He's not worth it. He's nothing a small man who hurts others to feel powerful. Let him go back to Chicago with the truth. I chose this. I chose healing over harming, love over fear, freedom over his twisted version of civilization." For a long moment, Lincoln held the knife steady. Then, slowly, he lowered it. "Leave. Now. Don't come back. Clara Nightingale is dead. If you pursue Clara Roosevelt, you'll join her." Wellington stumbled backward, his face a mixture of rage and fear. "You've made your choice then. Don't come crying to me when this all falls apart, when you realize what you've thrown away." "The only thing I threw away," Clara said steadily, "was the shame you tried to burn into me, and I've never regretted it for a moment." After he fled, Clara found herself shaking. Lincoln held her as the tremors passed, as years of buried fear finally released. "It's over," she whispered. "He has no power over me anymore." That evening, the healing lodge was full of people, students, patients, community members who'd heard about the confrontation. They came to show support, to stand with the woman who'd chosen to stand with them. Elizabeth Blackwell, who'd extended her stay to help establish the program, pulled Clara aside. "That took tremendous courage, facing the past, claiming your present. Many women never get that chance. Many women don't have what I have," Clara replied, watching Lizzie demonstrate her herb sorting system to a group of admiring adults. "A community that sees strength where others see shame, a partner who views me as an equal, work that matters, a daughter who'll grow up knowing she can be anything, belong anywhere." As the evening wound down, Clara stepped outside. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same eternal witnesses that had watched her flee Chicago in shame and terror. But now they looked different, not cold and distant, but part of the vast tapestry of life that included her small but significant thread. Regrets, Lincoln asked, joining her. Gratitude, Clara corrected. For all of it. Even the pain that drove me here, because here is where I was always meant to be. Lizzie appeared, tugging on her parents' hands. Mama, Papa, Grandmother Susan says to come. She's teaching the fire ceremony for healing. She says I'm old enough to learn. As they followed their daughter, Clara felt the truth of her words settle into her bones. She'd pretended cold to protect herself, built walls of ice around her heart. But love, unexpected, unprecedented, unashamed, had melted those walls, and in their place had grown something stronger, a life built on choice, on courage, on the radical act of healing across all boundaries. The stars wheeled overhead, marking time's passage, but Clara no longer watched them with longing for escape. She was too busy living the life she'd chosen, healing the world one patient, one student, one bridge at a time. In the healing lodge, Susan's voice rose in the ancient ceremony, teaching the next generation how to call on fire not for destruction but for cleansing, not for harm but for healing. Clara added her voice to the chant, her daughter's higher tones joining in, creating harmony from what others might see as discord. This was her answer to those who'd said she had to choose one world or another. She'd chosen both. Neither. Something entirely new, and in that choosing, she'd found what she'd never dared hope for in those dark nights fleeing Chicago home. Purpose, and the quiet peace of stars that no longer watched in judgment but in blessing. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, redemption, and the courage to bridge two worlds. I'm curious to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss Clara's incredible journey together. If you enjoyed this tale from the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit that like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help this story reach more listeners who appreciate authentic frontier tales. Your support means everything and helps keep these stories alive. Until our next adventure on the frontier, partners.